in later. But welcome to tonight's webinar. We are going to be looking at climbing nutrition today. And just before we start, it's going to be a big shout out to Adidas and 510. Without their sharing our vision, we really wouldn't be able to put this on this year. So huge thanks to them for helping us get some really inspirational women to be able to speak to you and to share their knowledge. So thank you very much. Rebecca is one of our firm favourites at WCS and has probably been there for when many of you have seen her over the years. She's worked with Shauna for about 10 years and does a lot in terms of looking at the nutrition and diet of athletes, whether that's downhill skiers or climbers or endurance runners. So she's got a fantastic perspective to bring to this. And actually we thought, when nutrition is something that's been highly on our minds, certainly in the UK over this period of lockdown and COVID, that it's something that we could all really benefit from right now. So if anybody's anything like me, first lockdown, it was like, yeah, I'm going to run 20 miles a week and I'm going to eat really well and I'm going to train and my pull-ups are great. And then kind of this lockdown, I'm probably eating 25 cakes a week and everything else has kind of gone out the window. So we're going to learn how to be kind to ourselves, but also to learn how to prepare for getting back to real life and getting back to training and being the people we want to be. So welcome, Rebecca, and it's so good to have you. Thank you.
Fantastic, and thanks for such a great introduction. Yeah, thanks for having me, Women's Climbing Symposium and Adidas, and great to have you here and all of the people that have joined me this evening. So as Rebecca was saying, I'm just going to talk through some tips and tools and some guidance, just really help us all try to kind of draw a level on where we're all at with our nutrition intake, and hopefully you'll have some good information you can start putting into practice straight away, and some other things that you can start to think about when we start easing out of lockdown for some of us who are still in lockdown, and especially when we're easing out. Those restrictions and climbing walls are starting to open up again. Here in France and Chamonix, the climbing walls are all still closed and potentially still shut until June, and then I know in the UK that's going to probably be April time. So just to get going and give an introduction of really where the lay of the land, as Rebecca said, in the first lockdown, certainly with all of the people I spoke to and worked with, we're all really super motivated. Lockdown gave us some time to, maybe a bit of time to plan meals, to think about our nutrition intake and to be right, I'm going to get fit, right, I'm going to use this time to make sure I'm eating healthier, or I'm going to make sure that I look after myself a bit more. But again, as time's passed, we've all experienced the stress of a pandemic and the added stress that COVID has brought to us, whether it's jobs, homeschooling, being at home with our family 24/7, which isn't always a good thing for our mental health and our sanity levels. We are all a lot more isolated from the communities that we love to spend our time in, particularly going to climbing walls, where it's a place of community and connection and well-being, as well as going climbing and training towards our climbing goals, whether that's indoors or outdoors. So with COVID has come a lot of stress, and we know, and we've seen from the research, that as we experience sustained stress over time, that does have a negative impact on our health outcomes and can interfere with our already established good health behaviors, such as nutrition, our exercise, and also our sleep. And we've also seen that COVID has had an impact and interfered with our motivation and our incentives to exercise regularly, eat well, and make good changes. However, for some of us, it's not all been bad news. I was looking at the research recently on intakes and nutrition around COVID and lockdown, and there has been some positive change in the sense of people have been cooking more, people are learning to cook, potentially with the limitations and restrictions of no restaurants, not being able to have takeaways, and also with the limited ability of foods from the supermarket initially, when people were potentially panic buying. Then we've turned to cooking more, we're learning to cook, we're being more creative with our cooking, again, because of what food's been available. We're potentially spending more time with friends and family that we're living with, and we're cooking together, and we're sitting down to eat meals together more often, because again, we're working from home, we're not out and coming home at different times. So that's again been a positive that some of us have experienced. We've also seen that people are wasting less food, and we're planning meals, again, in relation to potentially an increase in cost in food that some of us have seen, and also just the availability of food that we've had if we've gone to the supermarket and the foods that we've wanted haven't been there. Initially, there was a shortage on flour and pasta and eggs and things like that. So again, we've been wasting less food and planning more. There's been an increase in baking. I was certainly someone who was doing a family bake-off every weekend and allowing my 6-year-old niece to win every single time. So again, baking products and the sales of baking products actually went up by 2/3 during lockdown. Again, just creating a sense of environment and community by cooking with others online. And again, more of us have started to move towards vegan, plant-based during this lockdown, or during this time of COVID. Again, that's potentially related to cost. It's cheaper to eat plant-based foods. Meats and fish products are generally more expensive. So again, people have more time to be curious and more time to plan more of a plant-based vegan diet. So people have been experimenting more and moving towards plant-based eating. All of the information I'll give to you today encompasses all types of dietary restrictions and dietary intakes that we choose to eat. And again, lockdowns and quarantines are good for a lot of us. Some of us are reporting that we're looking after ourselves more, we're drinking less alcohol, and I'll touch a little on that as well. We've been taking more exercise and eating better again, but from my experience from last March, when the first lockdown, until now, people's motivation has certainly wavered. And more recently, we are seeing people are exercising less. We're losing our motivation because we don't know when races will happen, events will happen, competitions will happen. We haven't known when climbing walls and facilities will start to open up. Again, the negative impact that quarantine has had on us is that, again, it's increased stress, and that has led to potentially increased in cravings, and we're eating more often. And I'll go on to talk about our link to eating and comfort and control over in the next slides that I'll present to you. Again, people are reporting to drink more alcohol, but drinking more often through the week. Often, sometimes we'll get to a Friday night and we'll enjoy a glass of wine. But again, we've seen that people are actually drinking more frequently through the week, not necessarily more at that one time, but just having a drink. Again, it's something that is used as just to relax, just to unwind at the end of the day, just for that pleasurable experience, because we are so restricted that actually we're turning to those things that we can have, such as food and potentially alcohol, and enjoying those items whilst all our other usual behaviors that we enjoy have been restricted. Okay, so I'm just going to share this slide with you. So the first tip I wanted to share with you really was keep a food diary. Get an idea of where you are at this moment in time. And the other thing I wanted to say to everybody is just really give yourselves a bit of a break at the moment, some breathing space, in the sense of that all of our daily routines and habits have changed, and we've had to deal with a lot of change and a lot of ongoing uncertainty. As I've explained, that creates a lot of difficulty to keep up good habits, and it affects our motivation and incentive to change towards good habits. So really, I would just encourage everybody just to really breathe, just be aware that we're all doing the best that we can at this moment in time. And even if our eating habits are off, once we're through all of this and the restrictions start to ease and we start to get back to our new or usual routines, and we're more free, we're able to be more active, go on those trips, climbing trips that we want to, then that's when your good habits or your good eating practices will start to return and settle back in. So again, at the moment, I would just encourage everybody, really cut yourself some slack and just know that you're doing the best that you can in this moment in time, and motivation will waver, and your desire to eat healthier. And sometimes we won't be perfect. We're not perfect. And actually, it's just trying to start to think about the changes that you would like to make once again we start to ease out of these restrictions and life starts to feel a little bit easier again. The one thing I would encourage is certainly keeping a food diary, bringing our awareness to what's happening and what's going on a day-to-day basis. You don't need to keep one every day, but actually it will be a good idea. It could potentially be a good idea to keep a food diary once in a week, 2 or 3 times in the week, maybe picking a day during the week when you're working from home, in the sense of you are working, and then maybe a weekend day when you're maybe being a bit more active, and food intake might change over the weekend. So pick 1 or 2 or 3 days during the week and keep a food diary. It doesn't have to be something that you do every day. You can use an app, or you can simply write it down, whatever is easiest for you. So just start to bring your awareness of what's happening at the moment. It will also remind you of all of the good things that you're doing, and also maybe help to steer you towards some of the changes that you want to make. When we want to change our behavior, this requires understanding what our behavior is first, understanding what we're doing first. So again, keeping a food diary will just bring your awareness to what is going on. And then it's looking at choosing one thing at a time that you want to change. So if we're thinking about, we want to start to eat healthy again, or we want to reduce the amount of how often we're having a piece of cake in the week, or how often we're eating biscuits, or we want to start thinking about eating better to support our training, whether it's the home training that we're doing or the new exercise that we're doing, thinking about what changes that you start to want to make, and just simply write them down, and then choose one of those changes and think about what actions you need to take to make those changes. Again, looking at goal setting, planning for what's to come. So again, in the UK, we are aware of the restrictions that are lifting over time. So thinking about ahead, thinking about the goal that you want to set and what you need to do and the actions you need to take over time to make that change happen. But choose one thing. It's really difficult to try and change a lot at once, and often we set ourselves up to fail. We get up in the morning and we make a decision that we went, right, I'm going to exercise every day for an hour, I'm going to do meditation, I'm going to do my yoga, I'm going to hydrate, I'm going to cut out all chocolate for the next month, and I'm going to try and eat a healthy every single meal. And again, we're just setting ourselves too much to achieve. So again, it's starting with one change and one easy change that we can make over time. It's then looking at that goal and thinking about how important is it for me to change. In a scale of 1 to 10, often 1 being least important, 10 being important. So 1 to 10, often it's 8 or 9. This is really important. We want to change because we want to be healthier. We want to change because we want to eat to support our climbing and our fitness goals. So thinking about how important it is for you to make that change, and note 1 to 10. Then think about your confidence to be able to change on the same scale. 1, not very important, 10, really important. I'm full of confidence. I know I can make this change and I can sustain this change for the long term. Often our confidence is a lot lower, 4, 5, 6 or 7. We might have tried to make the change before, potentially during lockdown. We might have tried to eat healthier. We might have tried to eat less chocolate, but actually because of the stress, the current stress that we're experiencing, or the restrictions that were placed on us, we can't get to do the sport and go climbing that we love to do at the wall or with our friends. Then actually often we haven't managed to make that change and sustain that change, and our confidence often lower, so 4, 5 or 6. So the aim of goal setting is to choose a really simple one change at a time. Simply, so if it was one goal of reducing less cake, I'm just using that example because Rebecca mentioned cake at the beginning, but if you, for example, wanted to eat less cake, then say if we were eating a cake or a piece of cake every single day, instead of going, I'm going to stop eating cake, then simply keep the goal simple and say, I'm going to eat 1 less bit of cake on 1 day of the week. So eating cake 6 days and not 7. If you move through that week and you've done it, fantastic, you've achieved that goal. Tick. That then increases our confidence. Right, I'm going to do it 2 days this week. I'm going to do it 3 days this week. And again, that helps us to build our confidence, and that encourages us to continue to make changes. often we set ourselves up to fail. I'm going to make all of these changes. I'm going to do it all at once for the whole month. We might do well for a week. Life gets in the way. We feel stressed. Something happens that interrupts our changes. We drop a ball, we let one thing slide, and then we're going, oh my goodness, I said I would stop it all for a whole month, but actually I failed, and it's just after a week. You haven't failed, it's just that you've set your goal that's too hard to achieve. So you reflect on that, set a simple, easier to change goal, and start again. So each time we set a goal and you make a change, continue to reflect on it and see how well it's working for you. The trick is to keep it all simple. We are dealing with enough as it is at the moment. Again, you can start this process now, or you can start to simply think about what you'd like to change once we start to come out of these restrictions and we are all feeling a little bit better, and potentially find it easier to deal with making those more positive changes. But pick just one thing. Okay. Keeping a food diary was the first one. So this is a really useful tool that, again, I use with many people, athletes and people who are trying to just get fitter, and climbers, just to bring awareness to our eating throughout the day. Again, you don't need to change anything. This is something that you can simply use and just think about as you move through your day, whatever you choose to eat and drink. So this is the hunger and fullness scale. And as you can see, one is starving. We feel so hungry that we feel dizzy, our blood sugars are low, and we just feel terrible. 10 is we feel so full, we've eaten so much that we actually feel quite sick and we couldn't eat another thing. So as you move through the day, and if you're wanting to start to think about portion sizes, potentially if you're eating out of comfort, boredom, stress, if you're generally hungry, if you're doing more exercise, sometimes we are going to feel more naturally hungry. So again, this is another good tool to identify whether actually you do want to eat more if you're hungry, or whether you think you're just hungry. So again, it's a good tool to use just to raise our awareness as to why we might be choosing to eat when we eat. So as you move through your day, you can pick a meal, you can pick a certain snack in the day if you find that you're always hungry and you have an energy slump, say the 3 or 4 o'clock, or if you're sitting down after a day's work and you've done maybe an online class and then you're sat relaxing watching TV and you think, oh, I could just eat something. Again, if there's something that's creeping in the day that you're eating more of that you want to change, then again, this tool can be helpful to use. Again, you don't have to change anything at all, and I'd encourage you to use this tool through the week and not change anything about your eating habits. Simply choose one meal, one snack, or move through the entire day thinking about your hunger and fullness. So when you go to sit down and have breakfast, if you eat breakfast, then think, how hungry am I before I eat my breakfast? Am I a 3, 4, 5, or am I a 7 or 8? Ideally, when we go down to sit and eat, we want to be maybe a 3 or a 4. We feel hungry. Hunger's a good thing, but we're not starving. And then when we've finished eating, we want to be around a 5 or a 6. I feel satisfied. I feel like I've had enough. I could probably eat a little bit more, but I'm not full and I'm not stuffed. So again, it's just managing our eating and recognizing our eating and recognizing when we start to eat, where we are, thinking about how mindful we are as we eat our meals. So some of us are potentially eat too quickly. We don't chew our food enough. We need to be chewing every mouthful around 10 to 20 times, obviously depending on the texture of the food. But again, eating slowly, taking around 20 minutes to eat a meal, because it takes 20 minutes for our stomach to tell our brains that we've had enough to eat. And again, eating slowly. So again, another great technique is just simply counting when you chew. So put something in your mouth, and every time you chew, go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and at least get to 8, 9, or 10 before we swallow. And again, that can help control our eating, control for portion sizes, and then control how much we're eating throughout the day. And then you can do this hunger and fullness scale at any time. You can just simply think about it, or you can have a notepad, you can have an Excel spreadsheet. There's no right or wrong way of just being aware of your hunger and fullness when you choose to eat. And again, it can just bring up understandings and patterns of eating. So again, are we eating because we're generally hungry? Are we eating too much and overeating? Are we eating through comfort, stress, boredom, just because it's there? Again, we're all a lot closer to the kitchen at the moment, and so there's added temptations of just getting up from my desk and going to the fridge or to the kitchen cupboards just to have something to eat, because it's something that it's nice to do as part of our day. Again, there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's just trying to help you bring awareness to some changes if you're looking to improve your nutrition habits, and also if you find that you want to start to manage your eating, if you feel like you've started to overeat and eat more during lockdown. Great. Again, this is something that could be quite useful. Does your plate look like this? The plate on the right-hand side is quite a small portion of food, but again, it just represents a good example of the standard meal composition that I would suggest that we all need to start with, whether I work with elite Olympic athletes or whether I work with someone who climbs on a regular basis and has their own individual training goals. This is the first place I would start with everybody. We need to be doing the basics and doing them well. So this is how I encourage everybody's plate to look like. Carbohydrate on our plate of food will increase and decrease depending on how active we are through the day. So the less active we are, the less carbohydrate we can add to our plate. The more active we are, the more carbohydrate we can add to our plate. And that's just a really simple measure of it, and of being able to control food intake with energy expenditure. So as if we're sitting a lot more, if we're working from home, we're not moving as much because we're not in and out of the house, or if we're not moving around from a daily commute and popping out at lunchtime, then again, this is a great way of being able to control portions. Again, it's also a great way to increase our intake if we're not eating enough carbohydrate and we're not fueling our training and exercise sessions well. And you can simply start with a fist size. So 1 fist size of carbohydrate is what I would suggest for people to include on our plate, particularly for us women. It's important that we include carbohydrate in our diet for hormone health and reproduction. So again, start with 1 fist size of carbohydrate on your plate. If you're exercising, or if you're going out and doing a big hike or a run, or when the climbing walls are open and we're going out to do a long climbing session, whether it's outside or at the wall, I would suggest 2 fist size portions in your evening, in your meal before you go and exercise. So your meal 2 to 3 hours before you go out and do any exercise, whether it's a long run, hike, climbing session at the wall or outside, then 2 fist size of carbohydrate. And then when we're not exercising or reduced activity, then we can have 1 fist size. And it's a really simple way to manage portion sizes and just feel like we're in control of our eating. And again, at the moment, if we just want a gauge of what our portion sizes are that we're eating, then again, that's a great place to start. Choosing good quality carbohydrates, you have things like brown rice, oats, sweet potato, quinoa, and I'm trying to think of all the others off the top of my head. These are good quality carbohydrates that contain extra nutrition as well. A portion of protein is important to include on our plate. Protein is good for, particularly at the moment, good for satiety, good for helping us feel fuller for longer. I've added some snack ideas at the end that include protein. So again, if we find that we're snacking more, or we are feeling hungry more through the day, then adding some protein into your between meal snacks and making sure there's enough protein at each meal can help keep you feeling fuller for longer, and again, help control those portion sizes. Making sure there's enough protein at each meal and through the day will also help recovery from exercise and recovery from your climbing sessions or any other training and exercise that you're doing at the moment. And again, a good standard portion size of your protein is from the bottom of the palm of your hand to the knuckles, to round up to your knuckles, is a suggested guide of your protein content per meal, and it's around a minimum of 20 grams of protein per portion. So things like a salmon steak that you can see there, our standard salmon steak we'd buy off the shelf would probably be about 25 to 30 grams of protein in that portion. You've got around 200 grams of yogurt, which is about 15 grams of protein, cottage cheese. And for people who are more plant-based and vegan, you've got things like tofu, tempeh, edamame beans, lentils. So 200 grams of lentils is about 20 grams of protein. About 120 grams of tofu is about 20 grams of protein. So again, if you want something to do during lockdown, to start to think about how you can improve your nutrition, both to support your portion sizes, manage your hunger and fullness, but also help towards your recovery from training and exercise, then thinking about the portion of protein on your plate. List if you're plant-based, vegan, or you eat meat, or if you avoid dairy, whatever dietary method you follow, or foods you choose to eat or not eat, then actually just sit and write a list of all of the protein foods that you have and can include in your diet, that then you can make sure that you have at each meal. Particularly at breakfast, we're not very good at getting enough breakfast. So whether it's yogurt, eggs, again, for those people that are vegan, plant-based, there's some really fantastic higher protein non-dairy products, particularly yogurts. Someone mentioned to me an Icelandic non-dairy high protein yogurt that is on the market. So it's fantastic that these products are coming through to help people who achieve protein intakes if we're more kind of if we choose more plant-based options. So that's your protein, and again, half a plate full of vegetables and including some fruit, high in antioxidants, really good for recovery from exercise. Again, high in fiber, help keep us feel fuller for longer and can help control portion size. Great snacks. Raw carrots to have in the bottom of the fridge just to snack on through the day are fantastic. They take a bit of chewing and a bit of bite and can be really good snacks to have if we're just so tempted to go into the fridge, into the kitchen when we get up from our desks. Then again, raw carrots are great just to go in and grab out of the bottom of the fridge. But again, I've given you some snack suggestions at the end of this. Making sure there's a serving of healthy fats, things like your nut butters, avocados, nuts, seeds, olives, avocado are all really great options to include that often we forget as well. But again, if we're not as active, if we're trying to manage our weight, then keeping portion sizes of these foods contained, because they're quite high in calories. So whether it's a teaspoon of nut butter in your breakfast, or with an apple as a snack, or a dessert spoon of seeds in your cereal, or in a yogurt as a snack. Again, these are great additions to have in terms of healthy fats. Will help protect our immune system, good for women and our hormones and reproduction, but also good for recovery from exercise, immunity, all of those things. So it's really good that we include healthy fats in our diet. But again, if you're trying to manage what you eat and your weight at this time, then again, be mindful of the portion size of fat-rich foods. If you're not concerned about body composition and you're managing to train and exercise on a regular basis, then include them regularly, and you can just have them often through the day. Great. People would like to take a screenshot of this, they're welcome. I will send Rebecca a PDF. So if people would like the PDF of this presentation just for their information, then again, people can have free access to this. I think this is being recorded, so if people want to go back and watch over it, if you want to just hear the points again, then again, it'll be available to watch. The other point I wanted to mention is that during COVID and all of these restrictions with climbing walls shut and access to maybe our crags, local crags, and being able to travel further distances to get to outdoor climbing, and walls is been restricted, then we've potentially started to carry out more new activities, or activities just from our front door. Things like walking, hiking, running, biking, and certainly doing more online classes. Maybe with the easing of lockdown measures coming in the UK, then maybe hopefully everyone is starting to again get a bit more motivated and start to think about the exercise we can get doing to start getting fit for those projects. Okay. What I wanted to talk to you about was thinking about NEAT. So NEAT is what we call non-exercise active thermogenesis. What this means is all non-planned exercise. So all of those little movements that we do during the day, getting up and down from our desk, pulling the washing out of the washing machine and hanging it up, walking out our door to our commute, whether we cycle, whether we walk to work, or whether we walk to get the bus to then walk to our office space or location of where we work. we've seen that in research that being able to manage weight and maintain weight, actually this movement through the day is actually really beneficial at increasing our energy expenditure. And we've seen in weight loss studies where people who have intentionally lost weight because they've been overweight, that this non-exercise active thermogenesis can be really helpful at helping people keep the weight off. So again, if we're conscious about being less active, and we might be eating a little bit more than usual, then think about your general movement through the day. Can you go outside and walk around the block? Can you go up and down the stairs a few more times? Maybe take the washing out of the washing machine in 2 stints instead of 1. All of these different movements that we simply make during the day can actually help us keep our energy expenditure up and help us manage the energy intake that we are maybe experiencing having more from the foods that we're eating. So just think about how you can move more during the day, and whether that is signing up to a yoga class, even if it's for half an hour, or doing something that's more movement based, rather than thinking we've got to go out for a run for half an hour, or I have to go and do that walk for an hour. Again, just think about moving more. For anyone who has taken up new activities or going back to old activities we previously enjoyed, whether it's going out for a walk, hiking the hills, going on our bikes, or even our online classes, if you're exercising for 60 minutes or less, you really don't need to eat or drink anything. If it's an online class and you're getting hot and sweaty, then having a bottle of water to hand and just having a sip of water in opportune breaks is a great idea. If we're going out or we're exercising for longer than 90 minutes, then again, sipping on a sports drink, eating an easy to digest carbohydrate once in every hour, or having a bite of that snack every 20 to 30 minutes will just help keep your energy levels topped up. Again, a homemade sports drink is easy to make. Simply 200 mils of fresh fruit juice and 300 mils of water and a pinch of salt. You can use syrup or full sugar squash. So again, 100 mils of syrup or squash, 400 mils of water and a pinch of salt. Again, just making up your own homemade sports drink and then just sipping that regularly if you're going out for a hike, a run or a bike that's going to last potentially longer than 60 to 90 minutes. And again, an easy to digest snack that you can just have to hand or in your pocket, such as an energy bar, those pressed fruit and nut bars. So the bars that are made from dried fruit and nuts and oats are fantastic to take. A ripe banana if it doesn't get squished. Rice cakes, dark chocolate rice cakes are great, a nice tasty snack, and also fantastic to take out on the hill with you or out on a bike ride, or something to have if you're out for a nice long walk. Banana pancakes are great. 2 eggs, 1 banana, make those up. Great as a breakfast suggestion for adding more protein in, but also once they're made into small pancakes, they keep and hold together really well when they're cool. So again, a nice little snack you can just put into your pocket and take with you. Anything that's flapjack based, oat based. And again, for those shorter sessions, if you're out for 90 minutes, maybe just taking a couple of sweets or chews, jelly babies, gummy bears, that type of thing to stick in your pocket just to help you in those last 20 to 30 minutes, just to give you a bit of a boost of energy. So again, what you take depends on how long you go, but ideally 1 snack for every hour, or just have half of it every 20 to 30 minutes. And again, if you're heading out for something that's going to be a bit more intense, whether it's a run or a mountain bike or a road ride, then again, think about the last time that you ate before you head out the door. If it's been longer than 3 hours since you've eaten, then potentially have a easy to digest snack 30 minutes before you go. So whether that's a ripe banana, again, a pressed fruit and nut bar is ideal, a rice cake with some nut butter on it, a dark chocolate rice cake, just something that's going to top up your energy levels, and then head out the door. And that applies for even if you're just going to go out for an hour. If it's a hard effort, if you're going to go out for a run and you've not eaten for a while, then maybe a snack, easy to digest snack 30 minutes before you go might just help you have a better session or a better quality of effort, and help you get the most out of that run. And the one thing I'd say with any exercise training session, climbing session, is start hydrated. So make sure that when you step on that start line that you have you start hydrated, and you can simply do that by checking the color of your pee when you go to the toilet, and it should ideally a pale straw color. It doesn't have to run clear, but it'll just be mindful. If it's dark and it's a small volume, then actually you might need to drink more before you head out the door, or take some fluid with you, again, if you're going out for longer than 60 minutes. I just wanted to note on alcohol, again, the research was showing that we were drinking more often through the week. Sales of alcohol have gone up from supermarkets during quarantine and restrictions, again, most likely linked to the fact that pubs and bars and are all closed. Again, we are drinking more because it's a stress relief. Small amounts of alcohol can enhance our mood. We know that more alcohol over time in one sitting then has a negative impact on our mood, but initially it can boost our mood. It does add extra calories, so can make the difference between weight maintenance or whether we feel like we've gained weight during lockdown. It impacts our sleep, and we certainly have seen that during COVID and quarantine our sleep has been impacted just with change in routines, change in times we go to bed. We're looking at our screens more, that's keeping us awake, and again, if we're drinking more alcohol, this also going to affect the quality of our sleep as well. How can we reduce intake? Again, keeping it easy. If you find that we're drinking more often than we'd like, maybe have one less drink in that evening, or just say I'm not going to drink on a Monday evening, or I'm going to drink one less evening this week. Buy less or don't have it in the house. Have one more alcohol-free night in the evening, or even choose an alcohol-free option. There's lots of alcohol-free alternatives coming on the market. So if you find that this is something you want to start to change, the recommendations I would suggest is make sure that you have more alcohol-free nights than you would drink. So have 4 alcohol-free nights. Ideally, they need to be consecutive, because alcohol can stay in your system for up to 72 hours, depending on how much we've drank. So make sure we have consecutive alcohol-free nights, 4 alcohol-free nights in the week, and then no more than 2 drinks in those evenings that we do have a drink. Again, if we drink more than 2, that's when it starts to have a negative impact on our training and our adaptations and our climbing strength. So again, we've seen that drinking more than 2 drinks in an evening or one sitting, particularly on a training day, can actually suppress the strength gains that we could be achieving. So again, just be mindful, if we are drinking more, or you are drinking more, then you want to start to reduce, then set those easy goals and start to make those changes, or plan to make those changes once things start to feel a bit easier. These are the snack suggestions that I was talking about. Again, if you want to take a screenshot, or Rebecca will send these out. Again, it's just trying to give you some ideas of the combinations of snacks that include protein. Some of them, dark chocolate doesn't have protein, but you can combine it with one of the other snacks that does contain protein. So this is a list of snack ideas, and some of them contain a source of protein. So you've got your Greek yogurt. The picture on the top is egg muffins, a really great recipe to make. You can batch cook them and keep them in the fridge. If you simply Google egg muffins, there's lots of recipes that you can choose from. You've got cottage cheese on toast at the bottom. Popcorn is a great snack in the sense it's lower in calories, it's more filling and satiating, and we can eat more of it in the sense of it's lower in calories, so there's a more of a volume compared to things like crisps, and it's something that we can make at home. And you can often buy those grab bags from M&S that are the lightly salt and sweet ones, as opposed to the ones that are covered in caramel and any other sauces that again just add extra calories. So I hope that's helpful to everybody. If I've put whey protein shake, but if you're vegan or plant-based, then you can replace that with a plant-based protein shake, whether it's a vegan blend or a pea protein or a soya-based shake. Again, they're great as a protein snack in the middle of the day at the moment, just to really take the edge off any food cravings or hunger, and certainly great if we're training regularly at home or getting out and being active. Again, just helping with the recovery process through the day. Great, and I will stop there and ask everyone if they have any questions. I hope that's given everybody some insights and information.
Fantastic, and we do have some questions coming through, and everybody do keep putting your questions in the chat.
Again.
Put your questions in the box.
So first of all, any tips for nutrition to help with anxiety and depression? Probably a really topical one right now.
Any tips? Sorry, you broke up slightly then. Any tips for
nutrition to help with anxiety and depression?
Yeah, that's a really good one. Keep up, I didn't mention hydration, but keep up good hydration. If we're dehydrated, it can make us feel more tired. We've seen that it can make mental tasks feel harder to do, can make us feel fatigued and sluggish. So again, keep up good hydration. Oily fats like your oily fish, salmon, sardines, mackerel, flax seeds, really good for the brain. If we want to take a regular oily fish or omega-3 fat supplement, then you can choose an algae based supplement, which is an omega-3, but it's vegan, plant-based, or you can choose an omega-3 fish oil supplement.
Amazing. And then a couple of questions on sort of menopausal nutrition, which is, I think, something that's really important in the women's climbing community. So part one is quark, low-fat quark, a good evening snack, as something that might be a good protein intake with a change in metabolism? And then part two, are there any nutrients that anybody should concentrate on to ease hot flushes?
Oh yeah, fantastic. In the sense of the quark, yeah, it's fantastic, low in calories, high in protein. For anyone that's looking at dairy sources, you want to aim for about 10 grams per 100 gram. The closer you can get to that. Quark is fantastic, especially if you like it, and you can add all sorts of flavors to it. So that's a great snack to have pre-bed. And then in terms of hot flushes, again, keep up good hydration. There's some herbal remedies that things like, can't think of the top of my head, that can potentially help, and it's primarily staying away from things that will make it worse, in the sense of your spices and fat rich foods and things like that can potentially help the flushes feel worse and aggravate them. But again, in general, there's some herbal supplements, but off the top of my head I can't think of any. But when I answer to the remaining questions, if I don't get to them all, I will add that in to the end of the question.
Amazing. What's your opinion on a low carbohydrate diet for climbers in particular?
It's not necessary. As I mentioned earlier, the demands of carbohydrate depends on the demands of our activity and how hard we're working. The science has shown out and out that high intensity sports such as climbing requires carbohydrate, because we're moving so fast that actually carbohydrate is the primary fuel source for climbing, because our body can access it quickly. We're not climbing slow enough to access fat as a fuel source, and particularly on those crux moves, the high intensity efforts, we need carbohydrate. I'm not suggesting we need lots of carbohydrate in terms of a high carbohydrate diet, but certainly wouldn't advocate a low. But it depends on your definition of low. A low carbohydrate diet could just be lower than what you're used to eating, or you're making changes to eat lower carbohydrate because you find that you're eating too big a portion. So it depends on our definition of low carbohydrate. But in general, I wouldn't necessarily advocate a low carbohydrate diet, because we need to fuel our climbing, training and performance with carbohydrate.
Amazing. You can tell that carbs are emotive right now. And another question leading on from that from somebody else is, would you recommend limiting carbs a bit at dinner to increase quality of sleep and recovery? And
yeah, I'd say the opposite, actually. We've seen that carbohydrate can increase the levels of, I think it's serotonin in our brain that helps encourage sleep. So actually, it's one thing that I would say add into your meal. And it's when we get that post-lunch dip, or we've eaten too much at Christmas and we all feel tired, that comes from partly the carbohydrate. So actually, again, in studies have shown that carbohydrate can actually influence and have a positive effect on us sleeping. But again, it depends on portion size. If we're eating too big a portion size later in the evening and it's keeping us awake, then obviously eat less. But in terms of the link between carbohydrate and affecting our sleep, there isn't any evidence there.
Amazing. Got quite a few people living in households with other climbers, but mix of men and women, and really looking to see if there are any differences in pre and post climbing nutrition between men and women that you'd advise them to have a look at.
The first thing would a difficult one to answer, depending on the type of training session that people are doing. the data in the moment on the difference between men and women isn't large enough to really give specific guidance on women just have 20 grams of protein and men have 25 grams of protein. It comes back down to making sure there's protein in your recovery and some carbohydrate, and making sure that you fuel that session with carbohydrate. The quantity will come down to the duration and intensity of that session, and also the body composition goals and the age and gender of that person, and that's all calculated individually. But again, ultimately, to keep it really simple, we just need carbohydrate to fuel our training, and then protein and carbohydrate in the recovery phase. You can make it specific to men and women, but as a general question, there's no out and out number I can give or portion size that we've seen in any evidence to suggest that women need more or less than men. It just comes back to the intensity and duration of that session, and body composition goals and long-term goals of those individuals. I hope that makes sense.
Definitely. I think there's probably quite a few people experiencing difficulties with their routine at the moment, and feeling that there's going to be a change of that again as things shift in the next couple of weeks. If you can't routinely have a sort of set time to have your major meals of the day, what's best to do about it? Is it best to try and make that regular, or if it's moving about a lot, how do you best negotiate that?
It's thinking about the quality of the food that you're eating. So it doesn't matter whether we eat 3 square meals or we eat 4 or 5, 6 meals a day. If we're eating enough to fuel our session of that day, if we are training and we're recovering well, then actually the timing of our meals around that isn't necessarily important. It's thinking about the composition and the quality of that food that we're eating. So if you're not managing to get your regular meals, just think about making every mouthful count. So is there a source of protein in there? Is there some good quality carbohydrate in there if you need it? And is it nutritious? Is it doing me some good? As opposed to grabbing those unhealthier snacks that we might be veering towards. So again, there's no set rule to kind of our eating strategies through the day. It's just making sure that we're fueling any session that we're doing.
Fantastic. I think binge eating and that kind of emotional compensation was something that you mentioned in your introduction. There's a couple of questions, one about binge eating generally and how to kind of get a control of that, and also one when it's hormonally linked, say just before your period starts. Is there anything that you'd advise on those?
Yeah, so we've seen that just before our period starts, there is an increase in calorie requirements, and they're suggesting around 200 calories. So again, I would maybe loosen the grip on how we speak to ourselves. If we find that we're craving more or we're feeling naturally hungry, just allow yourselves to have those snacks. Again, it comes down to the choice of what you're having and the portion size of that. But again, at this moment in time, trying to think, well, can I reduce it? Can I eat less, or can I have something with it? So could you have a snack? Maybe if you wanted a piece of chocolate, then maybe have a piece of fruit with it. They call that habit stacking. So try and add a healthy item next to an item that isn't so healthy, and that helps to start to change that habit. So that's one thing that we can do if we find that during, before our period starts, if we find that we are choosing more unhealthier snacks or eating more, that's natural and common, and we do use more calories at that time. But actually, can you start to think about how you can replace it if you want to? For people who are experiencing binge eating, then that becomes more of is it something that you can control in the sense of using a hunger and fullness scale, or starting to reduce or become more aware of the triggers to that binge episode and start to control it? Or is it something that might be outside the realm of the help that you can give yourself and the help that I could give? And is it more something that we need psychological support or counselling to help us change those behaviours? So it depends on the severity of the binge eating episodes and how we experience them as to how we can then start to help change that behaviour.
Fantastic. And again, just being aware and changing things little bit by little bit.
Little bit by little bit, and sometimes we'll change, sometimes we'll try to change and we'll fall down and we won't be able to change. But it's trying to reflect on that move forward. Again, we're not going to be perfect all of the time, and life happens, so keep trying to make those changes. And if you feel that you can get a grip on it, just keep trying, and over time hopefully we'll be more consistent with the good habits than we are with those episodes when we're not as healthy.
As you said, when there's a goal to link them to, it really does motivate it. Yeah. Quite a few people wondering about veganism, vegetarianism, and protein intake. Somebody in the chat struggles to drink protein after a workout, avoids dairy, really dislikes protein powders. What's the best veggie way of being able to get that protein?
Oh, you put me on the spot. It's a good question, and protein shakes don't often taste that nice, and it is something we need to plan more for. Like things like a vegan plant-based protein bar. There's a lot of things like Eat Natural, the Kind bars have bars now that are protein based, so they just contain, whether it's soya based crisps in like puffed crisps, and nuts and seeds that contain some protein. So it's looking at somebody's mentioned they get a new zest pea protein, or can you make something that with the plant protein as a post recovery snack? So again, can you make a bar that's got added plant protein in, so that you can eat that when you have finished your training? It's trying to kind of be a bit more creative and think about, if I can't drink something and I don't like dairy and I'm plant-based, then what are the alternatives? And again, there's starting to be more alternatives available. I would look for the plant-based protein bars as the first step.
Fantastic. Question about how an individual can calculate more accurately what their daily intake should be, rather than just sort of looking at the thing on a packet that says average for women, average for men. Is there a resource that you'd recommend for people being able to do that?
Yeah, so you can, I've got a link actually that I can send to you, Rebecca, if someone wants it, but it's actually, there's automated equations online that you can use, but it's the Harris-Benedict equation you would tend to use for people who are active. So if people Googled Harris-Benedict online equation, then we can put in our gender, our height, our weight, and then we can put in our level of activity, and that will give you an estimation of your daily calorie requirements, and that will give it at rest and when you're active. Again, nothing's accurate, it's just a ballpoint figure, but again, it gives you a starting place. And if you track calorie intake using something like MyFitnessPal, and your weight's steady, then you can match that versus the calorie suggestions, and then just start to establish your norms for both rest and being active.
Do you have, this is another emotive one, do you have any guidance on coffee intake?
Yeah, coffee, in the sense of, the research has shown that coffee is not a bad thing, in the sense of actually we're finding it's more protective in the sense of brain health, heart health, those kind of things. So people say, I'll cut caffeine out, and I would say, well, why have you cut caffeine out? And often people think it's unhealthy, or primarily the main reason is that it affects our sleep. Caffeine's got a 6-hour effect. So if you drink a cup of coffee, then actually it's still going to have an influence on us 6 hours later. So if we tend to suggest don't drink coffee after 2 o'clock, because it can potentially keep us awake. So again, coffee's great before a climbing or a training session, just as a stimulant to help you get more out of that session. Coffee's a great taste. We enjoy coffee. We're a lot of coffee lovers. So again, it's not a bad thing, but again, it depends how much you're drinking. If you're drinking 4, 5, 6 cups of coffee in a day, and then you're drinking past 2 o'clock, and then you're wondering why you have trouble sleeping, then potentially drink less coffee. But again, it just depends on the use and how much.
We've probably got a quick fire round questions on different kinds of supplements and their values. So one of these is about gelatin collagen, and whether that can be sort of helpful. I think the sense is people are moving less during lockdown, and therefore feeling a bit creakier. Could those help?
Yeah, so again, it's people are moving less and feeling creakier. Again, just good hydration helps supply fluid to our joints. Omega-3 fats, so whether that's coming from your sardines, salmon, mackerel, or whether it's coming from a fish oil supplement or an algae oil supplement, can help with joint suppleness. Things like collagen and gelatin, if you've got a finger injury, or if you've got pre-existing tendon pain or recovering from previous surgery, knee problems, then taking gelatin and collagen can potentially be helpful, just as a blanket supplement to cover at all costs, potentially not. But again, as something to try and help support injury recovery or joint issues from climbing or previous surgery, then it can be helpful. Again, I would look at it as a case-by-case basis and make a decision. But again, I would probably go for glucosamine if people are feeling like their joints weren't as supple. And again, but something like glucosamine and collagen, you need to take and stay on it for at least 8 weeks for it to feel like it starts to take effect. Collagen can be 12 to 24 weeks before you start to feel the benefits. So the issue with a lot of these supplements is people don't take them and stay on them long enough. The same for fish oils. We need to give it at least 6 to 8 weeks, and probiotics, again, 6 to 8 weeks before we really start to feel any benefit. And often we take it for a few days or a week with like, oh, I don't notice a difference, but actually stay on them.
Amazing. And then quite a few people sort of struggling before COVID and now looking back to going to the wall afterwards and get all that time back on that bit where you've gone after work and lunch was a long time ago and dinner's probably not going to happen, or it's going to be way too late. How do you work out the nutrition for managing that evening properly?
Yeah, I mean, a common problem. So if your lunchtime has been the last meal that you've had, then ideally you want a snack and 30 to 60 minutes before you go climbing. So whether that's a ripe banana, nut butter and rice cakes, whether it's a pressed fruit and nut bar, whether it's a protein shake, you can just simply add water to and go with a banana. If people are milk drinkers, you can just buy some milk and have a banana. Some really food first options, a yogurt and a banana, things that you can grab and go, and an easy to digest snack. So have that, on the way to the wall, or if you can grab something just as you finish work, so that's got time to digest. If you still struggle with that, maybe buying something at the wall and then taking small mouthfuls throughout the session. So again, it needs to be easy to digest. So whether it's a ripe banana, whether it's rice cakes, whether it's an energy bar, and again, just taking mouthfuls and just drip feeding through the session just to help with energy levels and prolong your energy throughout that whole of the session. And sports drinks can be great for that. People feel like it's sugar and it's bad for us, but actually the sugar that you drink from the sports drink will be used as an energy source during that climbing session, and can actually help you get a better session out of that evening if you're actually taking some fuel with you and fueling during. Things like nuts and seeds, it's going to take you 2 to 3 hours to digest that and use it as an energy source, and it's fat. So again, it's not a fast enough energy provision to provide you when you're climbing. So again, it needs to be easy to digest carbohydrate sources. The closer you get to snacking to your training, the easier to digest the carbohydrate snack it needs to be. So trying to plan ahead. So if you know that you're going to go straight from work to the wall, take a snack with you to have mid-afternoon.
Amazing. Question about management of eating disorders and sort of finding that coping pattern that is sort of eating about the same amount every day, every meal, to just try and build that regularity into it. If you're training alongside that, so on sometimes on a training day, doing that strategy might mean you're slightly under-caloried, whereas on another day it might mean you're slightly over-caloried. Is that okay? Are there things that can be tweaked there that will still kind of give that structure?
Again, it might lend this to be something that you need outside support with, in terms of the psychological support to help you change your thought patterns and behaviors and understandings of where this eating disorder or disordered eating has come from. So understanding why helps us start to change it. But in terms of strategies at the moment, the problem with that is in terms of the long-term underfueling. So when we keep trying to take from our body, if you're doing a harder training session one day and then the next day you're still controlling and restricting eating, it will likely lend itself that you're always underfueling or always under your energy requirements. So we're always taking from our body. So again, that might not lend to a weight loss, but again, it can lend to other physiological negative effects, like down regulation of our reproductive system if we're women, downregulation of our thyroid function, reduced bone health in both men and women, and changes in our hormone levels, again, both in men and women, changes in mental state and function and mood. So again, if you're trying to manage as best you can, then can you possibly put in a snack like a banana before you train, and can you have something during, and can you have something afterwards? Even if they're small items, is there a way that you can start to put that sense of control in around your training as well, so that actually you are adding more calories, but still within the realms of what you're able to cope with whilst you're experiencing that eating disorder? But ultimately, it's reaching out for some help to try and help start to regain a normal eating behavior, just eating more for the demands that we're putting on our body.
Useful, thank you. Differences between processed and unprocessed sugar, question mark. I'm not quite sure how to interpret that.
So the processed sugar, I would imagine, so as I would see that, things like the highly processed foods like biscuits, cakes, crisps, packaged foods like pizzas and frozen foods that you pick up like breaded food will have added sugars in. Some of the sauces that we eat, all of that is obvious. It's not food and it's not nutritious. It's trying to think, we need to kind of wind back our understanding around sugar. People say sugar is bad, it causes inflammation. It doesn't, in the sense of we haven't seen that. Sugar is we don't eat spoonfuls of sugar out of a sugar jar and then go, sugar's bad for us. It's the sugar that is found in unhealthy foods, but then we also have unhealthy fats within those foods and ingredients that are not nutritious. So we don't just eat sugar as it is. When people say I've cut out sugar, I always, well, what foods have you cut out? And it's always things that we see as highly processed and unhealthy. So chocolate bars, crisps, biscuits, cakes, takeaways that are unhealthy, and all of the foods that we tend to grab. We know that they're unhealthy. We can look at it and go, that's not a healthy food. But sugar's found in fruit and dried fruit, things like you find in, say, in rice cakes or in oat cakes. These are kind of sugars that actually are just going to contribute an energy source. They're not going to do us any harm. And as climbers, then it's a great source of energy. So looking at sugars, whether they're natural sugars or processed sugars, like added sugars to those unhealthy foods, look at what you're eating. If it's fruit, if it's a whole food, if it's something like a pressed fruit and nut bar, great. It's going to be an energy source and it's not going to damage our health and contribute a high amount of calories or unhealthy food ingredients. But if we're looking at biscuits and cakes and crisps, we know it's unhealthy before we've even looked at the ingredients. So again, it's coming back to a bit of common sense. And sugar's great in the sense of it gives us an energy source to climb. And oats, pasta, couscous is all broken down into sugar in our body. Again, it just comes back to the food source that it comes from. So I appreciate the question, but it's, again, just a never straightforward answer.
Fantastic. And Rebecca's really kindly agreed to take the questions that we can't get through in the time away and record us some answers to them. So we'll share that with the link to this recording and the other resources that we've promised you. So I'm going to finish on a entirely frivolous but entirely wonderful last question, because it's very close to a lot of people's hearts. How much is a portion size of chocolate, and any tips for not overeating at dessert?
Oh, fantastic question. So there isn't a particular portion size of chocolate to have. It's again back to calories and how many calories we consume from that chocolate bar that contributes either excess calories that causes weight gain. If it doesn't cause extra calories for weight gain, then you can have the chocolate, whichever size it is. Again, it's looking at the chocolate and actually its nutritional value. And if we're eating chocolate a lot over time, then what's that doing to our health in terms of blood lipid levels and body composition. Dark chocolate's amazing. If you can switch from normal chocolate to dark chocolate, you've got the Lindt. So if you really wanted an idea of portion sizes, the Lindt have got big squares. So I'd say 2 squares, as a portion. And if you have green and blacks and it's the little squares, then maybe have 4 to 6 squares. Again, some of us are all or nothing, and once the bar's open, it's gone. And there's 500 calories gone just there. But again, it's coming back to understanding our own nutritional requirements and how often we're having that chocolate. But if you want some chocolate, please eat the chocolate. No foods are off limit.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
My
You've been
pleasure.
really, really generous with your time, and I'll send those questions to you. Just to thank everybody very much for coming and asking such good questions and getting stuck. So final thank you to Adidas and 510 for making this possible. And then just huge thanks once again to Rebecca for joining us tonight. You're such a steadfast member of this team, and we love having you every year. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.